Well, stay-at-home orders, closed restaurants, government closures. Is there anything left to restrict? Well, depending on how severe the pandemic gets, more draconian measures might be required, including things like restrictions on interstate and intrastate travel. The U.S. government already has constitutional authority to do so, meaning that the American way of life might be forced to adjust to a new normal. And as states step up their efforts, cooperation between federal and state governments will be key, not to mention compliance with private companies. For a more detailed explanation on how government jurisdiction works in times of emergency, let's bring in Cully Stimson, a Heritage Foundation senior legal fellow. Cully, good to see you. I'm not sure if you heard Trey Yingst just a moment ago talking about the Israeli government maybe using the military to keep people inside their homes. It's interesting because you wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, and I want to read part of it. It says, and I'm quoting here, containing the COVID-19 epidemic will require citizens, states, private companies, and the federal government to work together. One may hope the steps that have been taken so far will suffice, but emphasizing the sound, constitutional, and legal basis of these measures is important in reassuring the public that the government can do what is necessary to secure the general welfare. You're saying, in so many words, we're talking about, in some capacity, possibly using the military for other purposes, maybe kind of to enforce these stay-in-place mandates.
Right. Trace, and really we hope it doesn't get to that point. But remember that the states, through the governors, enjoy police power, and they can use the police and also call up their militia, their National Guard. And they're doing that now in some states, mainly to move medical and logistical supplies and that sort of thing. But they have broad state constitutional power to use their National Guard to enforce their stay-at-home and quarantine orders. So let's hope it doesn't get to that. But they do enjoy that power. The federal government does not enjoy or have police power under the federal Constitution.
Could the president federalize the National Guard if he so chooses? I mean, I'm clear he would get some major pushback from the governors, but isn't that an option?
It's an option, and the presidents have done that in the past, not for this type of situation, but to federalize them, to send them to Iraq or Afghanistan or that sort of thing. So there is a Public Health Service Act that is a healthcare-driven decision that allows the U.S. Surgeon General to make a recommendation, and ultimately the president can federalize the state National Guards. The president can further, under that act, arguably order no travel between the states and order a federal quarantine, although that act doesn't specifically say that, and any president would be wise to go to Congress to get a specific piece of legislation if that was necessary. Because
you're saying it could be clearly, legal arguments. You could have some lawsuits if that were to happen. Fair assessment?
Correct. Yeah, that's right. And you don't want lawsuits during this time. The courts shouldn't be deciding these decisions. Congress and the executive branch should be working together to solve this problem. And of course, I think, as you heard from earlier reporting, every single person has a part in this. Every single person needs to listen to the healthcare professionals and self-isolate, social distance, and all the things necessary. Wash your hands, the stuff your grandmother told you to do, to make sure that they do their part.
What do you think, Cully, about mandatory testing, mandatory vaccines? Are we kind of inching toward that? Because we know that testing apparently has shown dramatic results in some other countries. Do you foresee that on the American horizon?
I don't know. I don't have access to the information the government does, but I will tell you that in 1905, the United States Supreme Court issued a decision in Jacobson against Massachusetts, which upheld a state law that required vaccination there against smallpox, even against the person's desires not to get the vaccine. And so forced vaccination, forced testing is probably within the four corners of that decision. And you could see that.
Sure. Cully Stimson, good information as always. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Trace.